Welcome! This time on WoodWorks, we'll make this contemporary magazine rack. So please join us. Hi, I'm David Marks. Welcome to WoodWorks. Using bent lamination, we'll shape black walnut into the form of wishbones to create the sides of this innovative magazine rack. This magazine rack is a picture of contemporary styling. The brass rods cast a warm glow against the rich tones of the walnut wood. The legs gently create an elegant wishbone shape, revealing thoughtful artistic design as well as providing practical organization. The most striking feature of this magazine rack is the curve of the legs. We started with a drawing, several drawings actually, until we could come up with the exact curve that we liked. Then we made a full-scale design like this on some MDF. Now, creating a design really is a trial and error process that could take a little time. We wanted a rack that would hold about 24 magazines. So we took the average dimension of a magazine, which is approximately 9 by 12, and we used that in creating our design. Once we were happy with our basic design, we took our measurements and created this. Now, this thin piece of MDF may not look like very much, but this is the key component in creating our magazine rack. It embodies the essential curve and structure that will be used many times in the various stages of construction. We'll use this first to create our bending form. We use double stick tape and place the template on a sheet of 3/4 inch MDF. Trace the outline of one side of the curve. We extend the lines with a ruler so they are longer than our template. Then, using a compass, we'll lay out the opposing side of the curve, creating the shape of the leg. We want to add 1/8 of an inch to the width of our template to allow for a layer of cork that will be added later. The cork just compensates for any imperfections in the form. We're using the compass as a scribe. The point of the compass rides along the edge of the template, while the pencil, set at an 1/8 inch spacing, gives us the offset line we're after. Again, we extend the line with a ruler so it's longer than the template. Using the blade of the bandsaw, we rough cut the master template for our bending form. With a pattern maker's rasp, we clean and smooth the edges, and then finish the job with some light sanding. We put 120 grit sandpaper on a piece of 1/8 inch maple to make a flexible sanding strip that easily smooths or fairs the contours. Our bending form is made of 5 pieces of MDF stacked together. Just add some glue and you can join the pieces with screws. Now, the reason that our form is so wide is that we're going to be gluing up the laminates for 2 legs at one time. Now, our form is going to need 4 more pieces, so now that our master template is complete, we can use this to trace out the patterns on the other pieces of MDF and cut them out. Back at the bandsaw, we cut the additional pieces of MDF roughly to size. And then, one at a time, we attach them to the master template using yellow glue and screws. Once the glue dries, we flush the edges smooth at the router table with a flush trim bit that references the template. We continue adding 1 layer at a time, using the same process until all 5 pieces are stacked neatly together. We finish our form by lining one of the faces with an 1/8 inch layer of cork. The pliability of the cork helps to even out the pressure and gives us a leg that is perfectly shaped, and gives us a uniform glue line. We also seal the edges with some packing tape, and that'll ensure that the glue doesn't stick to the form. Let's take a look at our prototype. Our legs are 1.5 inches wide and made by bending 10 strips of wood. We want all 10 strips of wood to come from the same stock so that our grain will match up. We'll start with 8/4 stock that's 3 3/4 of an inch wide. This will give us enough for 2 legs at once. Now, because it takes 24 hours for the glue to dry, this will save us 2 days of drying time. We cut the walnut stock into thin strips, each 3/32 of an inch thick at the bandsaw. We use a triangular chalk mark to keep the grain of the strips in alignment. This will give the final lamination the look of solid wood. Then we run each strip through the drum sander to get rid of the saw marks. With our strips nice and flat, this will give us a uniform glue line when we bond them together. This is what you could call a challenging glue up. There'll be a lot of spring back pressure when you put this stack of glued up laminates into the form. Now, if the two sides of the form don't line up parallel, as you can see, our legs won't come out right. So, to guarantee that the two sides of the form line up perfectly, we'll lock these into position by clamping cawls down along each side. This will keep the form and our laminates from slipping. We're using a slow-setting plastic resin glue to glue the strips into a bundle. The slow-setting glue gives us more working time and will make the glue line of the finished piece resistant to cold creeping or separating. The wet glue softens the fibers of the wood and makes the strips more pliable. With all the strips stacked into a bundle, we place them into our form. Getting even clamping pressure is the key to making sure that the laminates take on the shape of the form. Once you've drawn the two forms together, if you're like me, you'll probably want to add a few more clamps. And then let the laminates set for 24 hours to dry. Let's see how well our bending form worked. Our leg is looking great. Now we'll finish our legs. We're using the belt sander to remove the dry glue. This glue is quite hard, so it's best to remove the glue from one side of your stock so you don't dull the knives on your joiner. We pass one side of the leg over the jointer, following the arc of the curve to produce a flat edge. Then, with the flat edge against the fence at the bandsaw, we cut the legs to proper width, producing 2 legs. Using the fresh cut on the second leg as a reference, we trim away the remaining glue on the outside edge. Next, we go back to the jointer and joint one edge of the second leg to get a flat surface. Then, we run each leg through the drum sander to produce a flat and parallel surface on the opposite edge. As you can imagine, it's kind of important that all of our legs are the same length. So once again, we use our template as a guide. We'll simply mark our lines here and then transfer those lines all the way around the leg. An easy way to trim the legs to proper length is to use a Japanese handsaw. The teeth of the saw blade gradually get smaller from top to bottom, so it's great for cutting laminates and making a smooth cut. Our magazines will hang from 1/4 inch brass rods that will be glued into holes on both sides of each leg. Now, we don't want our magazines to be touching the floor, so our first brass rod will be set at 9.5 inches. Now, you can really see on a project like this how important our full-scale drawing is. So we'll use it one more time to make sure that all of our holes line up. We'll simply transfer our layout marks from the design onto our template. Then we'll use our template to mark each leg. Now to get your initial measurement, simply square up the template and then measure up 9.5 inches. Using a compass, measure 3 inches from each hole and make a mark. That's where the brass rods will go. To mark the position on each leg, secure the template onto the leg with tape so it won't slip, and use a drill with a 1/16 inch bit to make small pilot holes. Then take your legs to the drill press. You want to use a 1/4 inch Forstner bit and drill your holes about 1/2 inch deep. A Forstner bit makes a clean cut and reduces the risk of chip out. It's time to cut the joinery for our stretchers. Let's take a look at our prototype. For the top, we use a half flap joint. We use a mortise and integral tenon here for the bottom stretcher. Now you might be wondering how you'll cut a mortise in a curved leg. Let me show you. To cut a mortise in a curved leg, attach the leg to the form using double stick tape. Then lay out the mortise marks with a pencil. At the drill press, securely attach the form to the table. Then, using a 1/2 inch Forstner bit, drill a hole 1/2 inch deep. With the leg still attached to the form, square off the hole using a hollow chisel mortising bit, and use a sharp chisel to finish up the corners. For the bottom stretchers, we've got some 3/4 inch square stock. We're going to be cutting some 3/8 inch long tenons on each end, here at the router table. Now we're going to be using this jig to keep the stock square up against the fence. It's kind of like using a cross-cut sled at the router table. With the bit raised 1/8 of an inch, we cut away all the shoulders by rotating the stock. This leaves us with tenons on the lower stretcher. For the top stretcher, we've got some 3/4 inch black walnut stock that we've already cut to 1.5 inches wide. As a design element, our top stretcher will extend past our legs 1/2 inch on both sides. To join the stretcher to the legs, we'll be cutting a notch 1.5 inches wide, which is the same width as our legs. To cut the notch, we'll be using the same setup that we used to cut our tenons here at the router table, only we'll just reset the fence a little bit. With the blade raised to 1/8 of an inch, we make the first pass on both sides of our upper stretcher stock. Then we reset the fence and make a series of cuts until we've notched away the center, forming a dado. Just checking the fit of our parts. With our frame clamped up, we can take the final measurement for our brass rods. Now we'll cut our brass dowels. To hold our magazines, we need to cut 12 brass rods, all the same size. To make our cut simple, we've clamped a board to our bandsaw table to serve as a fence. We're using a bimetal blade that cuts through wood and non-ferrous metals. Remember to set the guide low for safety and accuracy. To help the glue adhere to the brass rods, we'll use sandpaper to rough up the edges. This is not a complicated glue up, but it all happens at one time. First, we'll glue up one side with this top stretcher using some yellow glue, with this whole assembly set on its side. Then, we'll add the brass rods using some slow set epoxy. Apply yellow glue to the mortises, tenons, and dados. Then we clamp both sides together. Apply epoxy in the holes where the brass rods will be placed, and use the masking tape to protect the wood from glue that might squeeze out. Once both sides of the magazine rack are joined together, use spacers to align the whole assembly. And then clamp the base firmly together. To finish our magazine rack, we're going to be doing a hand-rubbed tung oil finish. The tung oil will soak into the wood and really bring out the depth and beauty of that black walnut. We'll apply several coats of tung oil to our magazine rack, and between coats, we'll use some steel wool to smooth out the surface. This unique wishbone design is displayed elegantly in classic hardwood for durability and lasting beauty. The contrasting tones of the brass and walnut make this modern magazine rack a triumphant blend of form and function. Maintaining your magazine rack is simple. All it takes is a little buffing with some 4/0 steel wool, and then follow up with a good quality wax. This will keep the brass and the black walnut looking good for years to come. I'm David Marks. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on WoodWorks.